recent 3-year study put together by the GC Resolve and the Nebraska Farmers Union Foundation is causing some concerns with maybe misinformation. Hi, I'm Susan Littlefield on the Rural Radio Network. Andy Scholting is with Nutrient Advisors. He looked through this research on poultry litter and water contamination and found some interesting discrepancies.
You know, most of the data is from the fall of 2019 through the fall of 2021. And in actuality, most of the Lincoln Premium Poultry sites came online in production between the fall of 19 through really the summer of 2020. Most of those operations did not remove any litter at all until the fall of 2020, which would really be right in the middle of the time of study. And, you know, as I look at the results of those contaminants in the surface water, most of those contaminants registered the highest levels in the fall of 19. That was before, you know, any of the new poultry operations in Nebraska had removed or land applied any litter.
When you're looking at this litter, kind of give us a little bit of background of what nutrient levels are. I know it probably changes depending on the time of year, but what are the nutrients in this litter that goes on these fields?
Well, I think, you know, there's a full assortment of nutrients in most animal manures, but what we typically focus on is nitrogen and phosphorus, and then you know, a third would be potassium. And you know, most of the farmers that came on board with Lincoln Premium Poultry are grain farmers as well. And one of their greatest incentives to become a partner with Lincoln Premium was the value of the nutrients and what they could do with that in their crop production on their farms and fields. And you know, the large majority of them have many more acres than they'll ever have enough litter to touch. So, you know, their application rates are very low because they're trying to stretch that phosphorus and nitrogen over as many acres as they can to maximize crop production.
So what concerns you as you look at this report and just the overall, I think, agriculture negativity that might be coming from this report?
Well, the report really leaves me with more questions than conclusions. You know, I'm appreciative of people. You know, we all want clean water. It's so important to all of us that live here in Nebraska. We want to recreate in clean surface water, and we want to be able to drink clean groundwater. You know, but as I look at the methodologies of the studies, there's a lot of details that are not in the report of how they did the testing. They did not disclose where they did the testing. And like I said before, many of the contaminants tested highest before any chicken litter was applied anywhere. So, you know, obviously it is perceived negatively. Everybody wants clean water in the stream. And, you know, the ebb and flow of weather in Nebraska sometimes creates you runoff and elevated levels of everything, including mud and soil in our streams at different times of the year. So, you know, I don't view it as very conclusive, and I know without a doubt that, you know, most of the data points were before litter was applied to these fields.
Andy, at the beginning of our conversation, you talked about the work that your company does when it comes to compliance and helping out livestock facilities. What type of paperwork and documentation is required when they're removing this litter to be put on fields?
Oh, there's a lot. Let me just walk through the process of if one of these producers wants to apply litter to one of their fields. Number one, they all voluntarily applied for a state operating permit, which requires a state-approved nutrient management plan. So, you know, up front, before they can even build the facility, we went through their whole farming operation, identified the farms that they wanted to include in the plan. You know, any application of animal manures requires fairly extensive setbacks from surface water, wells, tile inlets, etc. And then when it comes time to actually apply litter, we first have to go out and soil test the soil to determine the baseline of what is there for nutrients. And we test that soil 24 inches to 36 inches deep. And we're monitoring soil for nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, organic matter, pH, and, you know, several other analytes is what we're looking at. But we also test the litter up front, and we take into account many other sources of nutrient, whether it's previous crop residue, irrigation water, the nitrogen that we find in the soil, perhaps a second or third year credit from organic breakdown. So there's a lot of things that go into what we call a nutrient budget. And so we have to know what the crop plan is, what the yield goal is. That tells us how much nutrients we need to grow that crop. And then we start subtracting all of our credits to create, our maximum application rate. And with chicken litter, usually our maximum application rate is much higher than what the farmers are actually applying, because again, they want to stretch that litter over as many acres as they possibly can.
Those comments coming from Andy Scholting. He is with Nutrient Advisors, as he had a chance to go through the recent 3-year study released earlier this week from the environmental group GC Resolve and the Nebraska Farmers Union. I'm Susan Littlefield on the Rural Radio Network.